So let's go ahead and jump into our program today. We've, as y'all know, and I'm sure this is why you're here, is we have a great program today. We have two speakers. We have Juan De Lara, who's a risk manager in the Coachella Valley for the Federated Mutual Insurance Company. He manages over 2,700 acres of federated real estate assets in the Coachella Valley. Additionally, Juan assists with overseeing the farming operations, as well as the Travertine Point project, which is a 5,000-acre master planned new town, a project that will serve as a catalyst for sustainable development near and around the Salton Sea. Juan is a lifelong resident of the Coachella Valley and has many years of local government experience, having served 17 years on the Coachella City Council, as well as 4 terms as mayor of Coachella. Juan is a major stakeholder in the Salton Sea restoration, with his position managing land in the Coachella Valley for Federated Insurance. More importantly, he and his extended family care deeply about the eastern Coachella Valley and the detrimental effects on their region that an unrestored sea will bring. In addition to Juan speaking today, Patrick O'Dowd, Executive Director of the Salton Sea Authority, will be speaking, but we'll turn the virtual microphone over to Juan first, and he will then introduce Mr. O'Dowd. Juan, we're all yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I used to be a somebody. Anyway, glad to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about Salton Sea Action Committee, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Dowd, who will talk more about the sea and his position with Salton Sea Authority and all the great work that he's doing. I'll go right into my presentation, short presentation. As I was introduced, I do a lot of that stuff that was mentioned. I'm still doing it, and really lucky to be a part of the family of Federated Insurance. They're a company out of Minnesota that invested heavily out here in the East Valley, and mentioned was Travertine Point project, and that is a good example of the opportunities that await us in the eastern Coachella Valley, southern Coachella Valley in the future. And I'm sure Mr. O'Dowd will get into that. But I want to talk to you more about what we do with the Salton Sea Action Committee. Salton Sea Action Committee was formed in 2012. We're a local nonprofit organization that is comprised mostly of private sector members. You'll recognize some of the names. Matt Johnson, Ellen Pace, Andy Vossler, Josh Nickerson, Mike Sutton. And then we also have some folks from the Imperial County. We are very fortunate to have 2 representatives from the geothermal industry. One is Mark Grand, who also is a real estate guy, real estate agent or broker in the Imperial County, working for Cal Energy. Cal Energy is owned by Warren Buffett. There are 11 geothermal plants in the southern part of the sea. 10 of them are owned by Cal Energy, which is Warren Buffett. The other one is the latest and greatest. That was, I believe it was constructed in 2012. It was a $450 million plant, and Vince Signorati represents that company, Energy Source. And lately, you've been hearing about lithium extraction. Those 2 folks are working on that. So we have a tremendous amount of talent on our board that represents a cross-section of the community in both Imperial and Riverside counties. Salton Sea Action Committee was formed and created to support the Salton Sea Authority, which is Mr. O'Dowd and his board, as well as the California Natural Resources Agency, and all those governmental entities that are working on programs and plans and projects to restore the Salton Sea. The way we do that is we have 4 components. We do it through education and outreach, which is what we're doing today. We do it through advocacy, especially working with our governmental state and federal representatives, such as Congressman Reese, Assemblymember Garcia, Ben Wessel, and all those folks that are helping us out. The third thing is public-private partnerships. We've been involved in several public-private partnerships. And the fourth is fundraising. We do a lot of fundraising to support efforts around the sea, and we support the different organizations that are working on different programs. So that's pretty much what we do. I want to finish off by reading a short statement that we have in our brochure, and I'm going to drop some of these off later, either early next week or late next week to Ricky, and these will be in your office for you to pick up. The Salton Sea is shrinking as water levels at the 350 square mile lake recede and more of its shoreline is exposed. Environmental disaster looms. Failure to address the issue will exacerbate health problems caused by blowing dust, destroy critical habitat for fish and birds, and threaten the financial vitality of the Coachella and Imperial Valleys and beyond. The Salton Sea Action Committee is a not-for-profit organization made up of local residents and business owners committed to shaping a positive future for the Salton Sea. Salton Sea Action Committee was formed to support the Salton Sea Authority, a joint powers authority created by the state to oversee restoration. SACS, or Salton Sea Action Committee, preferred perimeter lake plan is the answer for the ailing sea. This alternative will work in conjunction with other proposed remedies and resolve the most pressing issues facing this valuable ecological resource. Mr. O'Dowd is going to talk about not only the perimeter lake plan, but other plans and projects that are happening around the sea. And I'd like to take this time now to introduce him, and we can start, his portion of the presentation. G. Patrick O'Dowd is Executive Director, General Manager of the Salton Sea Authority, where he oversees that agency's vital efforts to protect human health, revitalize the environment and economy of the sea and region. He recently served as a board member of the Coachella Valley Water District, originally elected in November 2014, and as a representative thereof, he also served on the Salton Sea Authority Board, having served a term as its president. Patrick is also on the board of directors of the Association of California Water Agencies, serving as chair of the board's Federal Affairs Committee, a member of the board's executive committee, a member of ACWA's Region 9 board, which is Riverside, San Bernardino, and Pearl counties, and serves from time to time as a member of numerous other committees and task forces. Originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, O'Dowd earned a bachelor's degree in construction from Louisiana State University and has an extensive background in business and finance, real estate, development, and media. After moving to the Coachella Valley in 1996, he worked locally in real estate development and sales, as well as senior manager positions with several operating enterprises, including publishing, fitness, and faith-based institutions. He has held a real estate license in Texas, a broker's license in Louisiana, and though presently inactive, has been licensed in California since 1999. Patrick has also served on numerous boards, including the Indio Water Authority and the Indio Planning Commission, and the Advancement Board of Cal State Cal State University San Bernardino's Palm Desert campus. Patrick and his wife, Kathy O'Dowd, an 8th grade teacher at Palm Desert Charter Middle School, are residents of Rancho Mirage and have 2 adult children and 2 dogs. And I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Dowd.
And 2 dogs.
2 dogs.
Thank you, Juan. Good morning, Rich and members of the Board of Realtors. I see a number of familiar faces this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly about the Salton Sea. As Juan mentioned, I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Salton Sea Authority, a position I've held since November of last year. I have to say, though, that his introduction makes me seem a lot older than at least I think I am. I thought it'd be helpful this morning for both those who know and those who don't to reintroduce you to the Salton Sea Authority. When I came on board as Executive Director and drawing from my experience, I had a pretty clear-eyed vision of where the authority was and with the direction of my board, where I would like to lead it. In February, I presented my board an outline of what I called its strategic priorities and values, which was information gleaned from various scoping efforts and our organizational documents. With direction from the board, that document then became the foundation of our business plan and budget for the current fiscal year, and indeed will inform the role of the authority will play in activities at the sea and throughout the region. It is also the framework for this presentation. If I could share my screen, we'll get started here. I assume you can see that. Okay. I would like to begin with a little background for those who might not be familiar with the authority and its mission. The authority was formed in 1993 to exercise the common power of directing and coordinating actions relating to the improvement of water quality and stabilization of water elevation, and to enhance recreational and economic development of the Salton Sea and other beneficial root uses, recognizing the importance of the Salton Sea for the continuation of the dynamic agricultural economy in the Imperial and Riverside County. It is led by a 10-member board of directors, each locally elected by their constituent. It includes 2 supervisors each from both Imperial and Riverside County, 2 directors each from Imperial Irrigation District and the Coachella Valley Water District, and the tribal chair and secretary from the Torres Martinez Desert Cahuilla Indians. The authority exercises its strong local leadership in consultation and collaboration with its project partners, including the state of California and federal government, to facilitate a promising future for the CN region. To accomplish this, plans, policies, and projects have been developed and are being developed by members and partners to address immediate impacts to human health and safety, to restore critical habitat lost to the declining sea, and to create opportunities for sustainable, indeed thriving local communities. However, the Salton Sea Authority alone, which includes elected officials from throughout the region representing each and every local stakeholder, sits at the confluence of this assemblage of members, partners, and stakeholders, and provides unparalleled leadership in the effort to revitalize the region through its unique power to influence or command thought, opinion, or behavior. By definition, that's our job. The history of the CN region is both rich and complicated. In its heyday, the sea was a recreational destination of choice for Southern Californians, with resort communities in the 50s and 60s springing up all around the sea. But its continual decline and its impact to the adjacent villages has resulted in some of the most underserved communities in our state living with poor air quality, impaired water qualities in some communities, and a general lack of basic services and opportunities. To be sure, the sea has been in a state of transition since its initial filling in 1905, and the inevitable unmitigated outcome of the sea was likely known as early, sorry about that, as the 20s, when Calvin Coolidge set the sea aside to create an evaporation pond for surplus and wastewater from the Imperial Valley irrigation development. The future of the sea was certainly clear when, by the mid-20th century, when in 1950, Elvin Hughes, then board president of the Imperial Irrigation District, described the Salton Sea as dedicated for use as a drainage and waste cesspool for the Coachella and Imperial Valleys, a cesspool. He went on to say that a shortage of water in the future will make it impossible to ever keep the water of the lake of such quality to make it desirable or even passable for recreational purposes. This has been a challenging situation for a long time. The historic and continuing declines in water quality, coupled with flooding at the sea in the 70s and 80s, and subsequent mass die-offs of fish and birds, resulted in mounting public pressure for action at the sea. Today, I want to share with you the 3 pillars that inform and the 3 priorities that direct the work of the authority today. Let's start with the 3 co-equal pillars upon which the authority stands. Ensuring human health and safety, our first and highest priority. No one living at the sea or in the region should go to bed at night or head to work or school each day worrying about the air they breathe or the water they drink will make them sick. Addressing the life safety issues and allaying the concerns of our communities is an undertaking the authority and our partners can and must do. It's a moral imperative. Preserving, revitalizing, and restoring habitat and wetlands being lost to the aging sea is another societal mandate. With resources already in place, protecting this important ecosystem for future generations is essential. Opportunity is the lifeblood of all communities. Jobs, housing, transportation, recreation, houses of worship, as well as access to reliable basic services are all part of vibrant, sustainable communities. And though it is all too often considered secondary to health and habitat, the ecosystem engine that created from these opportunities will fuel environmental protection, ecosystem restoration, and sustainable revitalization. Communities that lack opportunities ultimately become ghost towns. The Salton Sea Authority's 3 pillars, a 3-legged stool balanced on health, habitat, and opportunity, or what we call Salton Sea H.O, with a vision to transition the sea and region from what it once was to what it sustainably can be. The pursuit of that vision is manifest in three distinct priorities. If you've ever been to the sea, you know one thing: it's really big, about 35 miles long and 15 miles wide. It's the largest inland body of water in the state of California. Addressing these challenges will require landscape scale projects like the Species Conservation Habitat Project, a 4,000 acre, $200+ million project the state broke ground on in January, and scores more hundreds and thousands of acre scaled project. With input from the authority, the state has taken the lead in implementing this landscape scale priority and are staffing up in both Imperial and the Coachella Valleys to accomplish it. The state is obligated under the first 10-year plan to deliver 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression. However, much of what the state is currently addressing is immediate and indeed legacy challenges. Ultimately, the sea will require, what happened? There you go. Ultimately, the sea will require a big idea, the backbone upon which current and future projects will be tethered. Over the years, many projects have been proposed and studied, but a final selection of such a project has been elusive. Several projects have proposed importing water, either from the Sea of Cortez in Mexico or the Pacific Ocean, and the authority has seriously considered each. The Pacific Institute also conducted an early analysis on water importation, and the state of California is currently undertaking an effort to reevaluate those proposals. The authority conducted its own feasibility study, funded by the state, and developed what is known as the Perimeter Lake Plan. This plan allows for waters flowing to the sea to be conserved, conveyed, and used for habitat and mitigation purposes, while also recreating deep water habitat, which is all but lost due to the elevated salt levels in the sea. The authority views the concept of a perimeter lake somewhat metaphorically, as whatever plan is developed, which conserves, conveys, and repurposes the available resources of the region, including water, will have to be evaluated for feasibility and subject to significant public scrutiny. Working with our congressional delegation, the authority was able to secure funding at the federal level for a feasibility study, which, once completed, will identify and underwrite that feasible plan, making it eligible for up to 65% federal match, which would be an enormous expansion of funding sources to implement a long-range plan. Still, and while landscape scale projects are developed and long-range planning efforts get underway, the communities of the region continue to languish as they have for decades. And as the local stakeholders watch hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in habitat development in a region remote to most, they see their local shorelines fading into the distance and their communities and quality of life continuously eroding. The authority believes that addressing the needs of the communities is an urgent matter, and notwithstanding its commitments to the 10-year plan, the state must redouble its efforts to address life safety and other issues at the community level to allay the immediate concerns of the residents. Beyond that, renewing and revitalizing our communities is a principled, attainable objective that the authority and its partners will press to the best of our ability to realize. Members, partners, and stakeholders are all critical to the success of our efforts. Each brings a unique understanding of and expectation for their individual space in the region. The authority and each of its members, together with our partners, including state and federal governments, as well as others, including international stakeholders who bring tangible resources to ensure successful projects, work collaboratively to realize upon a bold, broad vision. Most important to our efforts, though, is the indispensable contribution of our vast stakeholders, including all those affected by the decline of the sea or benefiting from its renewal, and certainly includes each of you. The Salton Sea Drainage Basin covers 4 counties and part of Mexico, an area of 8,300 260 square miles, just a shade smaller than the state of New Jersey. And though the local air basin includes Imperial and parts of Riverside counties, and indeed Mexico, episodic burps at the sea impact air quality all the way to coastal communities. As the beating heart of the Colorado River Delta and a linchpin to water security in the West, the Salton Sea will no doubt be a topic of discussion in current shortage issues on the Colorado River, and even more so as we approach the expiration of the drought contingency plan. And considering that birds that visit the sea while traveling the Pacific Flyway from Peru to Alaska, and that agricultural production from the region is shipped worldwide, you begin to appreciate the vast impact the sea and region has on the West, throughout the country, and globally. Each life touched by changes at the sea, each one a stakeholder. We are hopeful that renewed measurable commitment by the state and federal government, that together with important regional stakeholders, including each and every community, agency, organization, and individual represented here today, we can forge ahead to ensure a bright, sustainable future for the region and the people who live and visit here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to your questions. And I am done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Am I still sharing?
You are still sharing, and
should
you
stop
are
now.
not now.
Good.
So if y'all have any questions, you can either type them into the chat or raise your virtual hand and we'll just have you ask directly. It's not very common that we don't have a list of questions ready to go. So David Cantwell, you always have the best first question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Oh, Lance jumped ahead of you in line. So Lance, go ahead and unmute yourself. Good morning.
Good morning. Just a quick question. I was distracted a bit. I'm not sure if you mentioned the recent headlines regarding lithium mining in the Salton Sea area, and what your opinion is on how that could affect the overall economy of that particular area.
So I think it's very interesting and exciting. It's part of the mosaic that I think will inform that long-term vision at and around the sea. I do think that a lot of real credible people are coming into that space with significant resources to realize upon that opportunity. I think that the impacts will be regional in nature, but it's not a single solution that's going to transition the region to the sustainable construct that it is, and everything that happens on one end will affect things on the other end. So I'm very excited about we have been active with the proponents of those projects in helping to assist them through the state and federal processes and otherwise. So I think it's exciting news.
Now, given the deteriorating situation with China and the demand for lithium, it seems like it would definitely it could have the potential to be a boom for the area, because obviously as a country we need to start developing our own natural resources, and not just, the dialogue's always been about oil, but I think it's beginning to turn more towards other natural resources as well.
I think there are two issues that are highlighted by the projects being proposed. One is local sourcing of supply, and the other is the environmental manner in which that resource is harvested. I think that the method that they are using purports to be significantly more environmentally friendly than it is developed worldwide. I think the challenge, as always, is going to be cost competitiveness and how much more, if at all, we're willing to pay for a local source of supply for rare earth minerals.
Thank you.
Great. Apparently the coffee is kicking in. We do have a couple of questions in chat now. So thank you, David Cantwell. You can either unmute or I'll ask your question.
If I may, just a follow-up comment to the lithium.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is it.
Okay.
In the future, if you'd like a presentation on lithium, like I said, we have two of our board members represent the geothermal industry, and they can come give you a very in-depth presentation on lithium and lithium extraction, what they're looking for, what it's going to take. Mr. O'Dowd, what's the name of that committee that was formed by the state on lithium?
I don't know the precise name of the committee, but it's in regards to lithium development.
Right.
They're calling the Imperial Valley now the Lithium Valley, and I think that there's a lot of effort, energy, and excitement going on to realizing upon the push towards renewable energies.
Right. And one of our ex officio members on our Salton Sea Action Committee is a gentleman by the name of Frank Reese. He lives here in Indio, and he's on that state committee. So he's, very, very much in tune with what's going on with the lithium extraction and that whole effort behind the lithium deal. So we can always come back and do a follow-up on that with you.
Great, thank you.
Isn't there a way that they could just make the lake smaller and then put ground cover so that there won't be blow sand for the air quality? And then maybe they could develop the land that was formerly the lake.
So there are a wide variety of options that have been discussed and considered. One thing that's going to be a factor in the ultimate long-term plan is how much water is available for whatever projects are developed at and around the sea. So the SCH project that I mentioned is a 4,000 acre project, and that's going to consume some of the water which has historically flowed into what we refer to as the sump, the inner sea, if you will. The water that flows into the sea is actually pretty good water. But once it gets into the main sea, it's about twice as salty as the ocean. So it really is not usable for very much, other than covering the playa. So as water is repurposed into wetlands or at and around the sea, whether they're shallow wetlands or deep water wetlands, it'll cause less water to flow into the sea, as will non-agricultural uses of water like geothermal and lithium development. It'll result in less water flowing to the sea. That's why some of the projects like the seawater importation are being considered to bring in additional sources of water. It's a very complex solution. It has strong advocacy, but it also has technical and political challenges. And as I mentioned, the state is evaluating that option as part of its development of a long-range plan. So I think within the next year or 18 months, we'll have a more crystallized vision on what can and can't be done based on the 2021 resources to create that long-term vision of what this region will look like.
Would that be from Baja or the Pacific Ocean?
So both have been proposed, and the state is considering, I think 11. I heard possibly as many as 12 different proposals, but they've considered bringing it in from Baja or up and over or through the mountains, the project proponents believe that they are feasible and achievable, and so. But the scope and scale of those projects is in the billions of dollars, and historically we have scraped and scratched for millions, tens of millions, and rarely a few $100 million. So getting access to the billions of dollars that those types of projects would require have never been realistically something that we have been able to achieve. It would be a project consideration for the Corps' feasibility study that we were able to secure. So if the United States Corps of Engineers deemed it to be feasible, then it would at least make it eligible for some component of federal funding. So it's something to be considered. But I know that a lot of people are frustrated with studies. Right? The sea has been studied since its filling in 1905. They've been studying it, and so I think what people want to see more than studies is projects. But I look at it, and I know you have a number of bankers that presented. I myself, a former banker. I look at it more as underwriting than studies that we're doing right now. What we're doing is considering what can get done feasibly. And once it's done, then we'll have the documentation necessary to go seek and secure the funding for the projects, which I think is the right way to do it.
Geothermal plants fund some of that?
I think you could find any stream of revenue to fund it, right? You could, I mean, pick one you like. I think that any taxing mechanism that that government believes is necessary or appropriate could be realized upon that. There have been discussions about taxing the energy coming out of Hoover Dam, and but so I think it's all a question of what and why and how. But sure, I think that the funding mechanisms are to be determined.
But they can't use Colorado River water, right?
Colorado River water, you mean increasing flows of Colorado River water to the sea? That's not likely to happen.
Okay.
Okay, great. Scott Newton has a question in chat here, and then Andy, I will call on you. Scott's asking, how much of the land under the sea is Indian land? Are there any issues there?
So the tribe is on the board of the Salton Sea Authority, so they're have partners with us since early 2000s in the work of the authority, and the answer to the question is a lot. Mostly in the northwest quadrant of the sea. Every other section that's underwater there is tribal lands, and so it's both opportunities and challenges for them. So I believe that our tribal partnership represents an entree into a conversation at the federal level for funding of projects that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. So I celebrate the authority's relationship with the tribal nation, and believe that there are a lot of projects that can be advanced with their advocacy to get done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Andy, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
I have a comment and a question. First of all, my mind is just like trying to create a diagram with all the stakeholders and all the agencies that are involved. I can't even imagine what the discussions at the boardroom table look like with representatives from each of those agencies with opinions and layers, and I can't even imagine. It's a daunting task, and I commend all of the stakeholders for trying to come up with, if not a plan that looked like on your perimeter, the perimeter plan with the lake looked like there were multiple ideas and multiple plans that could be put into effect. My question is, and I don't know, maybe you touched on it and I missed it. Agriculturally, because our a lake is surrounded by a lot of agricultural land and projects, and the products that come from those lands and that acreage supplies much of our produce, everything except maybe avocados. How are those growers and those farmers impacting the water situation, or vice versa? Are they creating more damage to the water, or are they able to, what does that look like with the agriculture?
So if there wasn't agriculture, there wouldn't be a Salton Sea. So it is here principally as an agricultural sump, as designated in 1924 by Calvin Coolidge. But as I mentioned in my talk, they knew sumps are not, this is not the only sump in the world. Right? There's a long history in agriculture with sumps and what happens as water drains into them. The good news is this is California. We've got a lot of smart people with technical competence, and we can figure out what to do with this sump over time. And as I mentioned, the water flowing into the sea is better quality water that can be used for the recreation of those habitats and otherwise. And as we develop these projects, it'll change the landscape out there to a way that I think it'll be different. You know, I thought about putting up a picture of myself in my senior year in high school with my powder blue blazer and my black velvet tie, and you know, I was rocking a lot more hair back then than I am right now. And so you know, I think the sea is kind of the same way. You know, in 1950s it was looking pretty good, but you know, I think that, you know, I try to take care of myself and get up out of bed and exercise, and I think the sea is kind of the same way. There's a lot to do here. I think I've lived in the desert for 25 years, and I think the solution to California, I mentioned in my bio that I've been involved in real estate for a long time. I know that I've worked alongside a handful of you as on this journey. I think that this is some of the best real estate in the world. I think the solution to California's affordable real estate is the Coachella Valley. We've got land, we've got water, we've got power, we've got workforce, we've got universities that are getting better all the time. We've got smart people, we've got some of the richest people, but we've got some of the poorest people. So, you know, this was just a gas for me to take this job, because I think that there's so much that we can do with a little bit of passion and vision, working with people like yourself who know what real estate means. The real estate's about the people, right? If it wasn't for the people, you wouldn't sell any real estate. So I didn't really answer your question, but
If I may,
I liked what I said.
can I follow up very quickly about ag, because we're in the ag business, and ag is very good for the sea. I think 80 to 90% of the water that goes into the sea currently comes from ag, but it really comes more from Imperial County. In the Coachella Valley, you have very little water that goes into the Salton Sea from agriculture, because we're pretty much 100% drip irrigation. So we provide very little water for the sea. The other thing about the water that we use on our lands is that it's highly regulated. You know, EPA, Regional Water Quality Control Board, all those guys are always looking at what are we releasing into the ground from the lands that we irrigate. There's a very strict order from the California Water Agency, the big board, that highly regulates the water that we release. We had to put together a group called the Coachella Valley Irrigated Lands Coalition, and we have testing sites throughout the Coachella Valley that test the water coming, you know, from the ground from our farms, to make sure that we're not releasing anything that's not legal or that is not allowed by the state of California. So agriculture is very highly regulated. Also, some of the stuff that we use, insecticides, pesticides, fertilizers, etc., highly regulated. A lot of that stuff, at least from Imperial County, that goes into the sea, Mother Nature does its business, and by the time it gets to the sea, a lot of it is biodegraded. So there's very little stuff that's harmful that we put into our water to irrigate our lands that actually ends up in the sea. We do get some stuff from Mexico, and Mr. O'Dowd can talk about that. But really, like I said, agriculture is very good for the sea. Without agriculture, the sea would not exist.
So I think
Doesn't the wash run into the sea?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that it's also true that it is Colorado River water that's flowing into the sea. So the water that ends up in the sea has come through the entire Colorado River basin, and so it's not just agricultural components that contribute to some of the challenges at the sea. In fact, some of the real challenges in developing a long-term plan are some of the minerals like chromium, like selenium, and things that come from the earth itself that consolidate and concentrate at the sea. So I do think that the agriculture has a eutrophic, an organic component that is part of what goes on, but that's, like I said, that's been part of the conversation for 100 years, and it's why it's there. I did want to touch on something really quickly, a comment about stakeholders and the number. and I tried to emphasize that a little bit in my talk. And that's where the Salton Sea Authority really has a role to play. The state's challenge in developing a plan is getting input from all the stakeholders, but the stakeholders can be as granular as an individual, right? Or an environmental justice group, or a group of any stripe. But the Salton Sea Authority is comprised of local elected public officials who represent everybody in the Imperial and Coachella Valleys. So they have already been chosen by the people to represent them. So AB 71, which was authored by then Assembly Member Perez, who's now Salton Sea Authority President Perez, basically says that the state shall develop these plans in consultation and coordination with the authority. And I think that's about right. I think we can collectively, my board knows the people in the community a whole lot better than anybody flying in from Sacramento, I can assure you, because they go to them to seek and secure their votes. So I just wanted to share that.
Great, thank you. We do have several questions here, and I don't think that we're going to get to all of them in an effort to stay on time here. But Robin, I do want to acknowledge you for a couple of reasons. First of all, I understand that if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be having this program today. I'm giving Ricky credit for it, as I do for all of our programs, but it was your contact. So thank you very much. Tremendously interesting program today. And so I turn the microphone over to you, Robin. Go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, Robin.
Hi, Patrick. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, this is a two-part question. When you were talking about the community opportunities, I've been over to North Shore. It's been a few years since I've been over there, but I was really impressed with the yacht club there. And I heard that it's not open anymore. It was at one point a historical museum. And if you could tell me what's going on with that today. And then as far as not allowing or preventing any ghost towns, what is your vision specifically for some of the communities that are in existence today?
So having served on the Planning Commission with my good friend Robin Dufault, that's a challenging question. You know, I think that, but we've got to find answers. You know, it's easier in some areas, it's more challenging in others. But I think that communities have to be sustainable. What do you do with Slab City? I don't really know. You know, but you take a community like North Shore, that's exciting to me. Desert Shores, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Salton City, to me, is the 800-pound gorilla down there. And I think that presents some real opportunities for some creative thinking. My wife's a teacher, and I think education is an important part of anything we do down there. So building strong, resilient communities is going to require infrastructure. It's going to require resources. It's going to require leadership. And all of that is something that I think the authority can influence. Specific to the North Shore Yacht Club, we have been for some time working on a North Lake pilot demonstration project, which is a concept that would inform the development of future deep water habitats. What we wanted to do, because you know, we had getting money, the money comes in tranches, in small amounts. And so we had to figure out a project that we could do with about $20 million. So we have conceptualized a lake, and there are 4 different conceptual plans for it at or around the North Shore Yacht Club. But in a perfect world, I think it would be beneficial to the community and the region if we could create a recreational body of water at or near the yacht club that the community could use, that the region could use, that could be an anchor for community life in the area. And that's pretty far along, and I'm hopeful that we can solidify a few other aspects of that so that it can reach the point where we can introduce it to the public for more comments. So I think that to me, there was a conversation between the Secretary of California Natural Resources, the chair of the Water Board, Joaquin Esquivel, who's from this region, I think Assembly Member Garcia, and a community member from North Shore. And they were talking about the funding and the projects and yada, yada, yada. And the community member from North Shore, they asked her about a community. She said, it's beautiful. And you know what? If you've ever been down there, it's pretty beautiful stuff. There's no surprise that, the earliest land developed in the Coachella Valley were up on the slopes, and they don't make a whole lot more of it. But as you move south, PGA West got where it is because, the Vossler family, had the foresight to go down there and gobble up, whole sections of land and create something very interesting that's been very sustainable. I think that there's some beautiful real estate down there myself. And, it's generational in development, but we've got a plan for the future of that region. And I'm just tickled to have a small part in it.
If I may, Robin, I can answer your question about the North Shore Yacht Club. It is a community center and it's operated by the Desert Recreation District. As far as the historical museum, the Salton Sea History Museum used to be in there way back, I don't know, 2009, 2008. They were an autonomous, separate nonprofit that when they were in the museum, in the North Shore Yacht Club, they were not registered with the Secretary of State. So because they didn't have the nonprofit status, they couldn't be in that building. So they ultimately moved to a site down at the end of Lincoln Street on tribal land. And then finally they left there and closed shop. In fact, I have a lot of the historical items that they had in the museum at my old office in Oasis. So we're looking for a home for the museum. But and as far as a closure, it did close down because of COVID-19. But I think it's opened back up again. But it's very active. It gets a lot of use, and it's still beautiful, as Mr. Oda just mentioned. And hopefully more opportunities will come about that we can restore that boat launch area, and you're going to see a lot more activity there. But as far as the vision, I think that you're starting to see a glimpse of it. We're working on a park there at Desert Shores. The County of Imperial put in about $40,000 in lights. We're going to be working on an irrigation system to plant grass. There's, you really can't find a home in the West Shores area to rent. I have family that lives there, and they found it very difficult. They were lucky that they were able to find something to rent. There are a lot of folks that love to off-road coming in from San Diego and buying up homes. Not a lot of building going on right now because there's still an issue with water, but the water district just completed recently, and Mr. Adad was part of that, a big transmission line from up near Valerie Jean area to the county line, a big 30-inch transmission line that provides certainty of water. And then the next phase is from Avenue 86, which is a county line, all the way to the West Shores area to bring more water, not just certainty, but more water that will help that whole area expand. So a lot of opportunity out there.
Thank you. I'm going to ask all of your permission to run a few minutes late here. We're about 1.5 to 2 minutes over right now. Lisa, I want to get to your question, and then we do have a couple of questions in the chat that if we can answer them quickly, I would love to get to those questions, but we really need to wrap up in about 4 minutes, even with some housekeeping stuff. So Lisa Stanfill, thank you for your patience. Go ahead and ask your question.
What is the current status with the lithium and sulfur issues out there?
I think we discussed the lithium development. Sulfur, I'm not familiar with,
Okay.
but lithium is actively being discussed and pursued on the south end of the city.
Thank you.
So one of the questions that we have in chat actually is about lithium extraction. And Scott is asking the question that he read that some of the extraction for lithium has led to small tremors in the area. You said that there's safer methods that can be utilized. Can you comment about that at all?
So I took one geology course in college, and that was more than a few years ago. I think that correlation does not necessarily mean causation. I'm not passing judgment one way or the other. I think it's a reasonable question to ask, but it is an active fault zone that has a lot of historical data. I think to the extent that it does, the geothermal development's been going on at least since the 70s that I'm aware of. So I think that they do have, pretty good data on the risk profile associated with that. But all of that stuff is evaluated under NEPA, and the environmental impacts of it are, it varies from administration to administration, but this administration is going to be pretty rigorous when it comes to environmental concerns. So I think that if it's a concern, it's going to be addressed or mitigated.
Okay, final question here from Tracy. Looks like we have 3 ways to make it better: to connect to the Pacific, go through Baja. The third is to dig deeper. Which way do you think is best? Your personal preference, your personal ideas as you've looked at all this. Do you have a gut feeling on any of it?
Yeah, I want to do it right. And I think that will be informed by the science and by the input from the community. But I'm not sure that there are, like I mentioned, there are 11 different proposals for seawater importation. And, that's, it's not that itself is not a new concept. And so I think that this will all be flushed out over the course of the next couple of years as the state, working in conjunction with the authority and local stakeholders, develops a long-range plan. But I think that we have to be realistic and work with what we have and not what we would like to have. And if this would be a different conversation if we had $100 billion of private capital flowing in to help solve the problem. But as I mentioned, we get 30 million or 200 million at a pop, and the scope and scale of the projects that are being discussed here are far more significant than that. And if those resources become available, those kind of projects will become reality. We can't solve tomorrow's problems with today's technology. All we can do is address the problems of today and I think they're very solvable. The first thing we need to do is convince people that they're not going to die because of the situation at the sea. I think that's a reality. I think we can inform them of that. Once we can eliminate the boogeyman, then we can start really introducing interesting projects at and around the sea. So my goal is to make sure, as I did on the Salton Sea Authority board, that the state understands what the risk to human health and safety is, and it's being mitigated. And then that people know that it's okay, and that there are people, smart people, working to develop long-term strategies for what this region will look like. And I'm excited about it.
Thank you both for your comments today. Patrick O'Dowd, Juan De Lara, great program. Really appreciate you joining us today. And so thank you. It's helped us to know what's going on in and around the Salton Sea.